Her husband divorced her at a party after selling her business, while his kids cheered. She calmly signed the papers and whispered, "You have no idea what you just did." 3 days later. Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Mr. Peter's Stories, your own family channel. May the Almighty pour His deepest mercy upon you and especially honor every woman among us with strength that never bends, patience that never breaks, and love that never runs dry. A woman carries the weight of families, heals without words, and gives without counting the cost. May God protect her health, reward her sacrifices, calm her heart, and surround her with respect everywhere she goes. May no woman here ever feel unseen, unloved, or unappreciated. I pray peace enters your homes, hope rises in your mornings, and comfort holds you at night. May your families stay united, your hearts stay soft, and your lives be filled with quiet miracles. This prayer comes from love for you, always. If your heart is true, like the video. If your love is real, write, "I am with Mr. Peter." The dining room looked perfect, 60 candles flickering across the mahogany table Haley had spent the morning decorating with eucalyptus and white roses, her grandmother's good china arranged precisely, each place setting measured twice because Justin demanded perfection in all things. The roasted lamb with rosemary filled every corner of their home, mixing with fresh dinner rolls rising in the kitchen and the lemon chiffon cake cooling on marble countertop. His favorite, made from Della's recipe card so worn the measurements were barely visible anymore from decades of use. Haley stood in the kitchen doorway, watching 60 people laugh and drink wine in the home she'd transformed from cold bachelor emptiness into something warm and alive and full of love. Laura refilled glasses, wearing that emerald dress they'd chosen together last Tuesday at the boutique downtown, looking so grown up it squeezed Haley's heart in ways that felt both painful and beautiful. Hector stood by the makeshift bar in the corner, telling some animated story with his hands flying everywhere, his smile wide and easy, the same smile he'd given her every single morning for 12 years over pancakes she made while he was still half asleep and grumpy. Justin's 50th birthday. She'd been planning it for 4 months now, testing recipes on weekends until she got everything exactly right, calling his college roommates to coordinate their schedules, handwriting invitations because he'd said email was tacky and impersonal, making everything exactly perfect so he could shine in front of everyone who mattered. That's what she did. That's what she'd always done for 15 years without complaint. "Speech, speech, speech," someone called out from near the fireplace, and the chant caught on like wildfire, spreading through the room until everyone was tapping their glasses with forks and spoons, the sound creating a symphony like bells announcing something ceremonial and important. Justin stood up from his seat at the head of the table, and immediate silence fell across the room like a curtain dropping. He looked handsome in the navy suit she'd picked up from the dry cleaners yesterday morning before heading to work, his silver hair catching the candlelight just perfectly, his face flushed with wine and the warmth of being surrounded by friends and attention. This was Justin at his absolute best, commanding a room full of people, making everyone lean forward to catch his words, being the center of everything. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he said, his voice carrying effortlessly across the crowded space. "This is a real milestone for me, a turning point, and I want to share some important news with the people I love most in this world." Haley felt herself smile reflexively, automatically, thinking he was going to announce retirement finally, maybe that trip to Italy she'd been secretly saving for in a separate account. Maybe they'd finally travel together like they used to talk about when they were first married, and everything felt possible. "I've sold the catering company," Justin continued, and Haley's smile froze on her face, died right there mid-formation. "Built it from absolutely nothing, but I'm ready for something new now. Fresh start, new adventures at this stage of my life." Applause rippled through the guests like a wave. Haley's mind was racing frantically, trying to make sense of what he was saying. Sold. They hadn't discussed selling anything. She'd been at the office just yesterday afternoon planning the detailed menu for the governor's fundraiser next month, reviewing contracts for the entire spring wedding season. What on earth was he talking about? Then Justin's eyes found hers across the room, found her standing there in the kitchen doorway with flour still dusting the front of her black dress from making his cake. And something cold and deliberate moved through his expression, something she'd never seen before in 15 years, but recognized instantly as calculated, intentional cruelty. "And while I'm making these big announcements," he said, his voice dropping slightly so everyone in the room had to lean in even closer to hear, "I'm also filing for divorce. Haley, the papers are on the kitchen counter right next to your beautiful cake. Please sign them tonight so we can all move forward with our lives." Complete and total silence fell across the room like something physical and suffocating. Someone's fork clattered against their plate somewhere in the back. A woman near the window gasped softly, the sound carrying in the awful quiet. Haley heard these sounds from very far away, like she was underwater, like she was drowning right there in her own dining room, while 60 people she knew watched it happen. She couldn't process the words her brain was hearing. Divorce, papers, tonight, kitchen counter, right next to the cake she'd decorated with such painstaking care, such love, such foolish hope that this celebration actually meant something beautiful between them. Then Laura moved, not dramatically, not with applause or cheering or any kind of obvious display. Just quietly, deliberately stepped away from where she'd been standing near the bar and walked across the room to her father's side. Stood beside him, silent, her face carefully arranged into neutral blankness, but her body language completely unmistakable. She was choosing him, choosing this moment, choosing this side. Hector followed without hesitation, set down his drink with a soft clink, and crossed the room in 4 long strides to stand on Justin's other side, flanking him like a guard. The 3 of them together now. A united front that had clearly been planned, rehearsed maybe. Father and children. And Haley standing completely alone in the kitchen doorway like a stranger in her own home. No one clapped, no one cheered, no one made any sound at all. But somehow the silence was so much worse than applause would have been. The room held its collective breath, while Haley's family visibly, publicly reformed itself without her, while 60 carefully chosen witnesses watched this quiet, brutal, surgical redistribution of loyalty and love. Justin's brother from across the table nodded once, slowly, approvingly. The neighbors exchanged knowing looks that said they'd been expecting this, maybe even hoping for it. Someone in the back whispered just loud enough for Haley to hear, "Well, it's about time someone stood up to her," and several people murmured agreement. Haley's legs moved without her permission or conscious control, carrying her through the crowd of guests, toward the kitchen while people stepped aside automatically, like she was carrying something contagious they didn't want to catch. Their faces stayed carefully, meticulously neutral, but their eyes followed her every single movement, cataloguing her humiliation, bearing witness to her destruction. She heard more whispers cutting through the terrible silence like knives. "Finally," someone said with obvious relief, and she was always so controlling about everything, and those poor kids having to put up with her for all these years. And she wondered distantly if this was actually a nightmare she'd wake up from soon, if morning light would dissolve all of this into nothing. The papers sat on the granite countertop right next to the lemon chiffon cake she'd decorated so carefully with his favorite lemon glaze, right next to the 50 unlit candles she'd planned to surprise him with at dessert, the ones she'd spent an hour arranging into the number 5 and 0. Her hands shook violently as she picked up the legal documents. The words swam together on the page, blurring. Irreconcilable differences. Petitioner formally acknowledges sole ownership of Greaves. Catering belongs to Matthews Family Trust. Respondent makes no ownership claims whatsoever. Respondent agrees to vacate all trust property within 30 days. Trust property, her grandmother's house. The one Della Matthews had scrimped and saved to buy in the 1960s, when banks systematically refused to give mortgages to black women, no matter how much money they had saved. The one she'd left to Haley in an absolutely ironclad trust because Della had warned her granddaughter, "Baby, you make absolutely sure no man can ever take from you what you built with your own hands." She found a pen in the drawer where she kept all the takeout menus organized. Her hand was perfectly, unnaturally steady when she started signing. First page, second page, third page, all the way through to the end, each signature feeling like she was cutting chords one by one, like she was watching something vital bleed out and die right there on the counter next to the homemade cake that nobody was going to eat now. When she walked back into the dining room carrying the signed papers, normal conversation had already resumed like absolutely nothing had happened at all. People were eating the lamb she'd cooked for hours, drinking the expensive wine she'd carefully chosen, laughing at jokes she couldn't hear over the roaring in her ears. She walked straight to Justin, who stood near the stone fireplace with his children still flanking him protectively like bodyguards, and she handed him the signed papers without ceremony. "Already?" Justin actually looked genuinely surprised, his eyebrows raising. "You didn't even bother reading them first." "I don't need to read them." Her voice came out eerily calm, almost pleasant, like she was discussing something as mundane as the weather. "You already made your choice in front of absolutely everyone we know. I'm just making it official so we can all stop pretending this marriage meant something." She leaned in close to him, close enough that she could smell the expensive wine on his breath and the cologne she'd bought him last Christmas, and she whispered directly into his ear so only he could hear, "Enjoy your fresh start, baby. You have absolutely no idea what you just signed away, but you'll learn soon enough." Then she turned to face Laura and Hector, who were still standing guard on either side of their father, like soldiers protecting their chosen general. She looked at Laura first. This girl she'd raised from 6 years old, whose hair she'd braided every single morning before school because Laura had said it made her feel pretty and confident, whose nightmares she'd chased away with infinite patience and love, whose first period she'd handled with such gentleness and grace that Laura had cried and said thank you, like it was the most natural thing in the world to be cared for like that. "I loved you exactly like you were mine," Haley said quietly, her voice steady and clear despite her heart shattering into tiny pieces behind her ribs. "Remember that when you finally figure out who he really is underneath all the charm. Remember that someone loved you when they absolutely didn't have to, when there was no obligation at all." Laura's face stayed carefully, deliberately blank, but something flickered way down deep in her eyes. Doubt, maybe, or the very faintest whisper of recognition that she'd just made a terrible, irreversible mistake. But she didn't move even an inch from her father's side, didn't speak a single word, just stood there in complete silent solidarity with the man who'd just publicly destroyed the woman who'd raised her with love and patience for 12 years. Hector finally looked directly at her for the first time since walking to his father's side, but there was no apology anywhere in his expression. Just cold, absolute certainty that he'd made the correct choice, that this was exactly where he was supposed to be standing. Haley walked through the crowd of guests toward the front door one final time, grabbed her purse from the hall table where she'd left it hours and hours ago, when she was still stupid enough to think this party was actually a celebration of something good. Behind her, she heard Justin say something to the room, probably another toast, probably celebrating his newfound freedom, and scattered, nervous laughter rippled through the guests in response. She sat in her car in the driveway for a long, frozen moment, just staring at the house she'd worked so hard to make into a real home. Every single window glowed warm and golden with light and life. Through the dining room window, she could see people cutting into her carefully decorated cake now, probably telling Justin how incredibly brave he was, how much better off he'd be without her, how they'd always privately thought she was far too controlling, too involved, too everything wrong. Her phone was in her hand before she'd made any kind of conscious decision about what to do next. She scrolled through her contacts with shaking fingers, found a name she hadn't called in 8 long months after a stupid, petty argument neither of them could probably even remember now. But absolutely none of that mattered anymore. "Uncle Ray, it's Haley. Yes, I know it's late and I know we haven't talked in forever, but I need you to do something for me right now, tonight, this very minute." She paused, watching through the window as someone inside raised a champagne glass high in what was clearly a toast. Remember when you helped me set up Grandma Della's trust? Remember all those ironclad safeguards you absolutely insisted on including, the ones that protected the business even if I got married? I need you to enforce every single one of them. Tonight. She listened to his confused questions, his growing concern coming through the phone clearly. Because he just divorced me at his 50th birthday party in front of 60 people we both know. His children, the ones I raised from babies, the ones I loved like they were my own flesh and blood, they didn't applaud Ray. That would have been too honest, too obvious. Instead, they just walked over to his side of the room, stood with him, silent, cold, deliberate, like I was already completely erased from their lives. Her voice finally cracked on the last word, just slightly. So yes, enforce absolutely everything in that trust. Tomorrow morning I want him to wake up and realize exactly what separate property actually means when you've been operating someone else's business for 15 years. She ended the call before he could ask more questions, started the car with hands that had finally stopped shaking, drove away from the house without looking back even once, even though absolutely everything she'd built, carefully over 15 years, lived inside those warm, glowing walls. She didn't cry. Not yet. There would be plenty of time for completely falling apart later, time to scream and rage against the cosmic unfairness of loving people who saw that love as weakness to be exploited. Right now, right this moment, she needed to be pure ice. Right now, she needed to be her grandmother's true granddaughter, the woman who'd survived so much worse than this and still built something beautiful anyway. 2 blocks away from everything she'd known, she pulled into a brightly lit gas station parking lot and made 3 more calls in rapid succession. Her bank manager's emergency line, her personal lawyer who'd helped establish the trust documents, the business accountant who'd been warning her for years and years that Justin needed to legally understand he was an employee with privileges, not an actual owner with rights. By the time she hung up from the last call, the sun had finally set completely, and the world outside her car windows was dark and cold and utterly completely changed from what it had been this morning when she was still happy. Inside the house she'd just abandoned forever, Justin was probably toasting with champagne right now, his arm around Laura's shoulders, his hand on Hector's back, telling absolutely everyone who would listen how much better his life would be now, how free he finally felt, how he'd finally escaped from the woman who never truly understood him, who never gave him proper credit for his contributions, who treated everything he did like it somehow didn't matter at all. He had absolutely no idea that Della Matthews had set up that family trust way back in 1983, specifically and deliberately to protect against moments exactly like this one. That every single business document he'd ever signed over 15 years said authorized operator with signatory privileges and not owner with equity stake. That his assumption that what's mine is ours only actually works in a marriage when the other person actively agrees to share. And Haley had stopped agreeing to absolutely anything the precise moment he'd announced her complete destruction as evening entertainment for 60 witnesses. Chapter 2. The morning after Justin woke with his head pounding like something large and angry was trying to break through his skull from the inside, and sunlight was stabbing through the bedroom curtains like a physical accusation made of pure light and judgment. His mouth tasted like regret and far too much champagne mixed with something bitter and chemical he couldn't quite identify. The bedroom smelled all wrong. Too much perfume, cheap and cloying, sheets that weren't the high thread count Egyptian cotton ones Haley washed and changed twice weekly without fail like clockwork. He opened his eyes slowly, carefully, and saw Amber curled against him, her dark hair spread across the pillow like an oil slick, and he remembered in fractured pieces she'd stayed after the party finally ended, after everyone else left, after Laura and Hector had gone to bed quietly satisfied that everything had gone exactly according to their carefully laid plans. His phone was buzzing insistently on the nightstand, had been buzzing for quite a while now, he realized slowly through the fog. The entire nightstand was practically vibrating with the force of it. He grabbed it with clumsy, uncoordinated fingers and saw 47 missed calls stacked up. Text messages were flooding in so fast his phone was actually struggling to keep up with the volume. His stomach dropped sickeningly before he'd even started reading anything, some deep animal instinct in his gut screaming at him that something was very, very wrong with his carefully constructed plan. "Justin, what the absolute hell is going on with the business accounts? I need my deposit refunded immediately. Call me back right now." "Did you really sell the entire company without telling your clients? This is completely unprofessional and possibly illegal. Your assistant says she can't access any company accounts. What kind of incompetent operation are you running? Called the office 6 times already this morning. Nobody's answering the phones. Where are you?" He sat up far too fast, and the entire room tilted dangerously sideways. Beside him, Amber stirred slightly, making a small sound of sleepy complaint. "What's wrong? It's barely 7 in the morning." "I don't know yet." He was scrolling frantically now, trying desperately to make some kind of sense of all the messages, the missed calls from numbers he didn't even recognize, the growing sick sense that he'd fundamentally miscalculated something absolutely critical. Something seriously wrong with all the business accounts. He called the bank directly, bypassing his usual contact. Got transferred 3 times, each transfer making his anxiety spike higher. Waited on hold for what felt like hours while some terrible smooth jazz version of a pop song played on endless repeat. Finally reached someone who sounded like they'd rather be absolutely anywhere else in the world. "Mr. Greaves, I show you as having signature authority on the Greaves Catering accounts, but that authority was formally revoked yesterday evening at 9:45 p.m. exactly. You no longer have access to any business accounts whatsoever." "Revoked? By who exactly? I've been running that business single-handedly for 15 years. A long pause. Keyboard clicking sounds. "Sir, according to our records, Greaves Catering is owned by the Della Matthews Family Trust, established in 1983. Ms. Haley Matthews is the sole trustee and beneficiary. You were added as an authorized signatory with full operating privileges in 2010 when you married, but the account ownership has always, without exception, been with the trust itself. Ms. Matthews has every legal right to revoke your access at any time for any reason." "That's..." Justin stopped abruptly, because it wasn't actually impossible or even surprising. He'd known perfectly well the business was technically in Haley's family trust. He just assumed confidently that after 15 years of marriage, after building up the entire client base from almost nothing, after running day-to-day operations, after making all the important decisions, the legal distinction didn't actually matter anymore in any practical sense. What's hers was obviously theirs. What's theirs was obviously his. That's how marriage worked, wasn't it? "Sir, are you still there?" "Yes." "What about the main operating account? The one I use for payroll and all business expenses?" "That's part of the business accounts, sir. All revoked as of last night." Justin ended the call with violently shaking hands. He pulled up the business bank app on his phone, the one he checked religiously every single morning to see their account balances. Access denied in bright red letters. The credit card app he used for all business expenses. Account closed. The personal checking account he'd maintained for 20 years. Insufficient privileges to view. "What's happening?" Amber sat up now, pulling the sheet around herself defensively. She looked younger and more vulnerable in the harsh morning light, and Justin felt a sudden flash of something that might have been real panic. "Justin? You're scaring me." He didn't answer. Couldn't possibly answer. He was frantically calling his lawyer now. Tom, the one who'd been at the party last night smiling and drinking, the one who'd helped him file all the divorce papers, who'd assured him repeatedly that everything was perfectly clean and simple and straightforward. "Tom, it's Justin. We have a very serious problem here. I know. I've been trying desperately to reach you since 6 this morning. Justin, did you actually read what you signed last night in front of all those people? Divorce papers. Standard stuff. Did you carefully read page 7, the detailed property acknowledgement section? Justin's mouth went completely dry. I skimmed it. It was just confirming assets, right? It was you formally and legally acknowledging that Greaves Catering is and has always been owned exclusively by the Matthews Family Trust. That you were an employee with operational authority but absolutely zero ownership stake. That you make no claims whatsoever on any trust property, including the business, the house, or any assets held within the trust structure. You signed it willingly in front of 60 witnesses who can testify you did so. But I've been running that business for 15 years. As an employee, a very well-compensated employee with excellent benefits, but an employee nonetheless. Justin, I pulled the original trust documents this morning. They're absolutely ironclad. Haley's grandmother set this entire structure up specifically to protect against exactly this scenario. What scenario? A spouse trying to claim ownership of family assets after a divorce. It's actually brilliant legal work. Justin felt the floor tilting dangerously under him. Everything I have is tied directly to that business. I know, and as of last night you don't have access to any of it. Downstairs, he heard a sound that didn't belong. Heavy, mechanical, wrong. He scrambled to the window in just his boxers. A large tow truck was backing up methodically to his black SUV in the driveway. He ran down the stairs in his underwear, Amber calling frantically after him, his head pounding viciously with every jarring step. "Hey! Hey! That's my car!" The tow truck driver didn't even look up, just kept hooking chains to the undercarriage with practiced, efficient movements. "Vehicles registered to Greaves Catering LLC. Repossession order came through at 6 this morning. You can't just take my car." "I got official paperwork says I can." He pulled out a clipboard, showed Justin a form with official-looking stamps all over it. Vehicle lease was through the business. Business revoked the lease. You got a problem with that. Take it up with the actual owner. I am the owner. No, sir. According to this, you're not. Haven't ever been, actually. Behind Justin, Laura came running out in her pajamas, hair wild. "Dad, there's another truck in the back. They're taking my car too. And mine." Hector appeared in the doorway, hair sticking up everywhere from sleep. Justin stood in the driveway in his underwear, watching 3 vehicles get systematically hooked up and lifted, his children shouting panicked questions he couldn't possibly answer, neighbors opening their curtains to stare openly at the spectacle, morning sun beating down mercilessly on his complete humiliation. Amber appeared on the porch wrapped hastily in his bathrobe, looking horrified and calculating simultaneously. His phone rang again. Unknown number. He answered without thinking. "Mr. Greaves, this is Westside Properties Management. Your monthly rent payment for the office space was declined this morning. We need payment within 48 hours, or we'll begin formal eviction proceedings." "Rent? I thought we owned—" He stopped. He'd thought a lot of things that were turning out to be completely wrong. He'd thought running the business for 15 years meant something legally. He'd thought marriage automatically made her assets their assets. He'd thought wrong about everything. Justin hung up, tried calling Haley directly, straight to voicemail, tried again, same robotic voice, again, again, again. Laura was crying openly on the front steps, phone clutched in her hand. "Dad, my credit card isn't working. I tried to order coffee delivery and it was declined. Then I checked and the card's been completely cancelled." "Mine too," Hector said quietly, staring at his phone like it had betrayed him. "And my bank account is totally empty. The account doesn't even exist anymore." "She set up those accounts for you," Justin said numbly, the pieces finally clicking into place in his hungover brain. "Deposited money every single month. Now she's closed them all." "Can she just do that?" Laura's voice was rising toward hysteria. "Apparently she can do whatever she wants. It was always hers. I just didn't pay attention to that part." Amber came down the steps, dressed now in yesterday's wrinkled clothes. "Justin, we need to talk seriously. My car payment didn't go through either. You said you'd set up automatic payments from the business account, remember?" "I did. I thought I did." "Well, they bounced. The dealership just called me. They're coming to repossess my car this afternoon if I don't pay 3 months back payments immediately. Her voice was getting sharper, more accusatory. 3 months, Justin. How long have you been paying attention to absolutely nothing? Justin couldn't answer. His phone wouldn't stop ringing. Country club asking about membership dues 6 weeks past due that he didn't know about. Lawn service, pool maintenance company, every single automatic payment he'd set up from the business account over the years. Bouncing. Every bill he'd never thought about because Haley handled absolutely everything, suddenly coming due all at once. Laura's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and went completely pale. Dad, my college. They're saying tuition payment for next semester didn't go through. The account on file was closed. How much do you owe them? $18,000 by end of month, or I can't register for any classes. He actually laughed. Bitter, sharp, slightly unhinged. I don't have $18,000. I don't have $18 in any account I can actually access right now. Hector looked at his father with dawning horror. What are we going to do? I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? You're the adult. You ran the business. I operated the business, Justin shouted, something breaking loose inside. There's a difference. I just didn't understand that until right now. His phone buzzed. Text from unknown number. You have exactly 48 hours to remove your belongings from the house. After that, locks change and anything left becomes garbage. This includes Amber. He stared at the message. Read it twice. Felt the last pieces of his carefully constructed life crumbling into dust. We need to start packing, he said quietly. Right now. All of us. Chapter 3. The Kingdom Falls. The boxes were stacked in the living room like monuments to complete failure. Brown cardboard boxes from the liquor store down the street, each one packed carefully with pieces of a life dissolving faster than anyone had imagined humanly possible. Justin carried his clothes from the master bedroom in armfuls. Suits Haley had picked out because she'd said they made him look distinguished and professional. Shoes she'd insisted on buying because the old ones had actual holes in them he'd been ignoring. The expensive watch she'd given him for their 10th anniversary, engraved with words that now felt like cruel, mocking jokes. My partner in everything. Every single item he touched had her fingerprints somewhere on it. Every drawer he opened released her distinctive scent into the air, lavender and vanilla, and something else that was just uniquely, indefinably Haley. The entire bedroom still smelled overwhelmingly like her, and it made his stomach twist violently with something he absolutely refused to call regret or guilt. Laura moved through the house like a ghost haunting her own life, silent tears streaming continuously down her face since dawn broke. She'd tried calling Haley 23 times now. Every single call went straight to voicemail immediately. Every text message sat there with delivered, but no response, no read receipt, just silence, stretching endlessly into forever. In her trembling hands, she held the heavy photo album from the hallway bookshelf. Thick, brown leather, spine cracked from years and years of use, filled with pictures Haley had organized and labeled meticulously in her careful, precise handwriting. Each page was a complete story. Each story was undeniable proof of everything they'd thrown away. Laura and Haley at the beach when Laura was 7, both laughing with sand in their hair and sunburn on their noses, building a castle that would be gone by evening tide, but mattered so much in that perfect moment. Laura's first school play where she'd played a talking tree. She'd been so nervous she'd almost thrown up backstage until Haley sat with her for an hour and said that nerves just meant she cared deeply, and caring deeply was actually brave. Laura's 13th birthday, both wearing ridiculous sparkly birthday hats that Haley bought even though Laura had said they were babyish and stupid, and in the photo, Laura was smiling genuinely, actually happy wearing something silly, because somehow Haley always made silly things feel completely safe. We should throw that away. Amber stood in the doorway, arms crossed defensively over her chest. She'd been quiet all morning, watching the family systematically fall apart with calculating, measuring eyes that saw everything and softened for nothing. Why? Laura's voice came out sharper than she'd intended. Because holding on to those pictures won't change anything about what happened. She's gone. She made her choice. Looking at old memories just makes moving forward harder for everyone. We made the choice first, Laura's hands tightened protectively on the album. We chose Dad. We stood with him when he destroyed her in front of everyone. Your father freed himself from someone who treated him like an employee in his own business. It was never his business. Laura's voice cracked painfully. That's the entire point. We all just assumed it was ours when it was always hers. In the kitchen, Hector was packing dishes one at a time, handling each piece like it might shatter under the weight of his accumulated guilt. The expensive china Haley's grandmother had left her in the will, serving platters they'd used for every Thanksgiving and Christmas and Easter, coffee mugs with small chips and cracks from years and years of morning routines. He picked up a blue ceramic bowl, turned it over slowly in his hands, saw the thin crack along the rim held together with superglue that had yellowed slightly. He'd broken this when he was 9 years old, knocked it off the counter playing with a soccer ball inside, something Haley had told him not to do 100 times. He'd been so scared when it shattered, scared of being yelled at, scared of punishment, scared of disappointing her in some permanent way. But Haley had just swept up the pieces without a word, glued it back together carefully that night while he slept, and the next morning it was back in the cabinet like nothing had happened. Things don't have to be perfect to still be useful, she told him when he noticed the crack. Sometimes broken things become more valuable because they survived being broken. Remember that, baby. He'd forgotten. He'd forgotten absolutely everything that mattered. Justin appeared in the doorway, looking 10 years older than yesterday. Leave the dishes. They're hers. Everything is hers. Hector's voice was flat, emotionless. We just pretended it wasn't. By evening, they'd made 2 trips to Derek's apartment across town. Everything they could prove actually belonged to them, fit in a 2-bedroom space with thin walls and flickering hallway lights and the smell of someone else's dinner always hanging in the stale air. Laura stood in what would be her bedroom, barely big enough for a twin bed and nothing else. She could hear absolutely everything. Amber being sick in the bathroom again, the couple upstairs screaming at each other, the television next door too loud. Her phone buzzed. Dylan Chen, the boy she'd been seeing, who'd told her he loved her 3 weeks ago in his car. Heard about your family stuff. Sounds rough. Maybe we should cool things off. My parents are being weird about me dating anyway. Laura stared at the message. Read it 3 times. Felt something crack open inside her chest, not heartbreak exactly, more like final confirmation that she was completely alone. She threw her phone across the room as hard as she could. It bounced off the wall, clattered to the floor, screen cracking in a spiderweb pattern that seemed fitting. Hector appeared in the doorway. You okay? No. Yeah. Me neither. He sat on the floor next to where her bed would go. They didn't talk for a long time. Just sat in gathering darkness while the apartment creaked and someone upstairs dropped something heavy that made the ceiling shake. Finally, Laura said, Last night at the party, when Dad announced the divorce, I didn't know what to do. I just walked over to his side, stood there, like it was automatic. Me too. But I keep thinking about her face, how she looked at us, not angry, just empty, like we'd erased ourselves from her life in that one moment. We did erase ourselves, Hector said quietly. We chose him, and he chose himself. Laura picked up her phone from where it had fallen. The cracked screen made everything look broken. She opened messages, scrolled to Haley's name, started typing. I'm sorry for everything. I know you won't read this, but I need to say it. I'm so sorry. She hit send. Watched the message sit there, delivered, but unread. Across town, 200 miles away in a city where nobody knew her name, Haley's phone buzzed in her purse. She was standing in what would be her new restaurant, walking through empty space with an architect showing her renovation plans. She felt the phone buzz against her hip, ignored it, kept looking at plans, at kitchen layout, at dreams she was building from scratch where no one could take them. At home that night she finally looked, saw Laura's message, felt something twist behind her ribs, grief and love and anger tangled together in a knot she couldn't untie. Her finger hovered over the message, hovered over the reply button. Then she set the phone face down on the counter, poured herself wine, sat alone in her small apartment and let herself feel everything for exactly 5 minutes. When the 5 minutes were up, she washed her glass, dried it, put it away, went to bed. She'd spent 15 years being the person who fixed things for people who never appreciated it. She wouldn't spend the next 15 being their safety net every time their choices hurt them. They'd chosen their side. Now they could live there. Tomorrow she'd meet contractors. Tomorrow she'd finalize her menu. Tomorrow she'd keep building. And if that made her cold, so be it. She'd learned from the best. From a grandmother who'd survived being told no by every bank in the state and built something anyway. She closed her eyes and forced herself to stop remembering, because remembering hurt more than forgetting ever could. Chapter 4. The First Crack. 3 weeks crawled by like wounded animals dragging themselves toward some uncertain end. Laura stood behind the counter at Rosie's coffee shop, making vanilla lattes for people who'd known her all her life, people who used to eat Sunday dinners at their house, who used to tell her how lucky she was, who now looked at her with expressions somewhere between pity and judgment. "Is it true your stepmother took everything?" Mrs. Henderson asked while waiting for her usual order. She'd been at the party. She'd been one of the people standing silently while Haley's world ended. She took what was hers. Laura's voice was flat, automatic. She'd said these words so many times, they'd lost meaning. Still, though, leaving you kids with nothing, that seems harsh. She didn't leave us with nothing. We never had anything. It was always hers. We just forgot that part. Mrs. Henderson's face pinched like she'd tasted something sour. Well, she should have been the bigger person. Laura handed her the coffee without responding. After Mrs. Henderson left, Laura stood in the back room and cried for exactly 5 minutes, timed it on her phone because longer meant she wouldn't stop, then washed her face and went back to work. At the construction site across town, Hector was hauling lumber through September rain that came down cold. His hands were raw and blistered despite work gloves that didn't fit right. His back ached from lifting loads probably too heavy for someone his age. His boss, Frank, watched him struggle with a bundle of 2x4s, saw the way the kid's arms shook. "Take 2 trips, kid. No shame in it." "I got it." Hector's voice came out tight with strain. "Pride doesn't build houses. Smart work does." Frank handed him warm water from the truck cab. "You're the Greaves kid, right? Your family ran that catering company?" "Yeah, thought so. My daughter got married 3 years ago. Your stepmom catered it. But what I remember most is that she asked about my wife's dietary restrictions, learned she was vegetarian, made special dishes just for her without us requesting it. Remembered everyone's names." Frank's voice went soft. "That's rare. That kind of care." "She's not my stepmom anymore. What is she then?" "I don't know." The words came out broken. Frank was quiet for a long moment, rain hammering around them. "My dad left when I was 12. Mom raised me and my 3 brothers alone, worked 2 jobs, never complained, showed up for everything no matter how tired. And for years I gave her hell, thought she was too strict, too demanding. Wasn't until I had my own kids that I understood what she'd sacrificed. By then, she was gone. Cancer took her fast. Never got to tell her I finally understood." He looked at Hector directly. "Whatever happened with your family, don't wait until it's too late to understand who showed up for you. Pride is expensive. Sometimes it costs you everything worth having." That night in the cramped apartment, Hector sat on the floor with his phone, staring at Haley's number. His thumb hovered over the call button, pressed down slightly, pulled back, pressed again. Laura came home from her shift, clothes smelling like burnt espresso. She saw him sitting there, saw the war on his face. "You thinking about calling her?" "I don't know what to say." "How about sorry? Is that enough?" "Probably not, but it's a start." Laura sat beside him on the floor that was still sticky despite cleaning it twice. She pulled out her own phone, opened messages with Haley. "I've texted her every day for 3 weeks. She hasn't responded once. Maybe she won't ever respond. Maybe we don't deserve a response." They sat in silence. Justin was at his fourth job interview this week, each one ending the same way. Polite interest until they checked references. Laura's phone rang. Unknown number. She answered cautiously. Hello? Laura Greaves? A woman's voice, professional and clipped. Yes? This is County Regional Hospital. You're listed as the primary contact for Dylan Chen. He's been in a car accident. Laura's heart stopped, then started too fast. Is he okay? He's stable. Minor injuries. But he's asking for you. Can you come to the hospital? Laura was grabbing her jacket before she'd fully processed the words. Which hospital? I'll be right there. She was in Frank's truck 5 minutes later. Frank had lent it to Hector after seeing how desperate the family was, with Hector driving because Laura's hands were shaking too badly. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and fear. Dylan was in a room on the 3rd floor, his leg in a cast elevated on pillows, his face bruised but alive. Laura. He looked genuinely relieved. Thank God I'm okay. Minor accident. But I needed to see you. You texted me 3 days ago to say we should cool things off. I know, I was an idiot, I was scared. Your family situation seemed so complicated and messy, and I just wanted easy. He reached for her hand. But then I was in that car thinking about how stupid it would be to die without telling you that I miss you, that I was wrong. Laura looked at him, this boy who'd told her he loved her when it felt good, who'd abandoned her the second her life got complicated because he wanted easy instead of real. She thought about Haley, about 15 years of showing up, about braiding hair every morning even when Laura pulled away, about sitting through nightmares, about being present for every moment even when that presence wasn't appreciated, about the difference between someone who loves you when it's convenient and someone who loves you when it costs them something real. No, Laura said quietly, pulling her hand away. What? Laura, come on. No, I'm not doing this. You left when I needed you. You decided I was too much trouble. You don't get to come back because a car accident reminded you that life is short. That's not fair. Life isn't fair. I learned that when I stood next to my father and watched him destroy the only person who ever really loved me. Laura's voice was shaking. I won't be with someone who only wants me when it's easy. Laura, please. I hope you recover okay, but we're done. She walked out. Hector was waiting in the truck. That felt good, she said finally. Terrible, but good. Where to now? Take me to Haley's old restaurant, the one downtown. They drove through darkening streets. The old restaurant location was empty, windows dark, a Felice sign hanging crooked in the window. Laura got out anyway, pressed her face against the glass, looking for any sign of where Haley might have gone. There was nothing. Just empty space where decades of history had been erased. An older man walked by with a small dog, saw them looking. That place closed last month. Owner disappeared, no forwarding address. Do you know where she went? Laura's voice was desperate. Nope, just gone one day. Heard rumors she's opening something new somewhere, but nobody knows where. He walked on. They stood in the rain staring at empty space. She erased us, Laura said quietly. Completely. Yeah, she did. They stood in darkness, finally understanding what it meant to be on the other side of someone's closed door. Across the city, in a town 200 miles away where nobody knew her story, Haley stood in her new restaurant kitchen, teaching 3 new cooks her grandmother's recipe for collard greens. She was smiling, actually smiling, free of their history, their expectations, their ability to hurt her. She never thought about them. That was the lie she told herself. But tonight, in darkness where nobody could see, she let herself remember what it felt like to braid a little girl's hair while they both laughed, what it felt like to sit on a little boy's floor, telling him stories until sleep claimed him. Then she forced herself to stop remembering. Because remembering opened doors she'd spent 3 weeks learning how to lock. Chapter 5. The call. Laura's hands were shaking so violently she almost dropped the pregnancy test into the toilet water. She sat in the employee bathroom at Rosie's coffee shop during her 15-minute break, staring at the plastic stick like it might disappear if she looked at it hard enough, like the universe might take pity on her and rewind time and give her a chance to make different choices about everything. But the line stayed pink, definite, undeniable, screaming at her in a language her body understood, even if her mind was still desperately trying to reject it. 10 weeks. Had to be 10 weeks based on the last time with Dylan, back when he'd told her he loved her in his car, back when she'd believed him because she was desperate to believe someone cared, back before everything fell apart. She wrapped the test in layers and layers of paper towels, shoved it deep into the trash can under coffee grounds and crumpled napkins, washed her hands 3 times with industrial pink soap that smelled like fake flowers and regret, looked at herself in the mirror. Her face was pale, eyes too wide, dark circles underneath. She looked exactly like what she was, a 17-year-old girl who'd just realized her life was about to get infinitely more complicated. She made it through the rest of her shift on pure autopilot. At closing time, she walked 6 blocks to the free clinic downtown, the one with the faded sign and the waiting room full of women who all looked as scared as she felt. She waited 2 hours. Finally saw a doctor who confirmed what she already knew. 10 weeks pregnant. Healthy so far. Options available. "You should bring a parent or guardian to your next appointment," the doctor said gently. "I don't have one." The words came out flat. "Your mother is gone." "Your father?" Laura thought about Justin, drunk in the apartment last night, ranting about Haley. "He can't know about this." The doctor gave her pamphlets, phone numbers, instructions to make another appointment. Laura took everything and walked out into night that had grown fully dark. She stood on the corner for a long time, phone in her hand. She tried to call Hector. Got voicemail. Tried again. Same result. She opened her contacts, scrolled to Haley's name. The name alone made her throat tight. Her thumb hovered. She hit call. Let it ring once before panic made her hang up. Tried again. Hung up after 2 rings. The 3rd time she forced herself to let it keep ringing. "Hello?" Haley's voice, cautious and careful. Laura opened her mouth. Nothing came out except a sob, sudden and ugly. All the fear and shame spilling out in gasping cries. "Who is this?" A pause, then softer. "Laura, I'm pregnant." The words fell out between sobs. "I'm 10 weeks pregnant and I'm scared. And I don't know what to do, and Dad doesn't know, and I can't tell him, and I need—" She couldn't finish. Long silence on the other end. So long that Laura thought maybe Haley had hung up. Then, "I'm going to give you the name of a clinic, a good one. They can help you understand your options. Do you have a pen?" "Wait, you're not coming." Silence. Then Haley's voice, careful and measured. "Laura, I can't be the person you call every time you're in trouble. That's not fair to either of us. Please, I don't have anyone else. You have your father. You have Hector. You made a choice at that party 3 weeks ago. You stood with them. Call them." "They won't understand. They won't help me the way you—" "The way I what? The way I always did? That's not my job anymore, Laura. You made that very clear when you walked to your father's side and stood there while he destroyed me." Laura was crying harder now. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. I know you are. But sorry doesn't change anything. Sorry doesn't give me back what you took. You need to handle this yourself. You're 17. You're old enough to make choices. Now you're old enough to live with them. I can't do this alone." "Then call your father. Call Hector. Call the clinic I'm about to give you the name of. But don't call me expecting me to fix this for you. I can't be that person anymore. I won't be." Haley gave her the clinic information, told her to take care of herself. Then she hung up. Laura stood on the street corner holding her phone, feeling more alone than she'd ever felt in her life. She went home. Didn't tell Hector or Justin. Just went to her room and stared at the ceiling. 3 days later, she called the clinic Haley had mentioned, made an appointment, went alone, made the choice alone. Afterwards, sitting in the recovery room with medication making everything soft, she texted Haley, "I did it. I handled it. Just wanted you to know." Haley's response came an hour later. I'm glad you're okay. That took courage. Nothing more. No offer to meet, no checking in, just acknowledgement that Laura had done what needed to be done. And Laura understood, finally, what it meant to burn a bridge. You don't get to walk back across it just because you're sorry. You have to learn to swim. 2 weeks later, Laura found a better job. Started saving money, started making a plan that didn't involve rescue, because no one was coming to save her. And maybe that was exactly what she needed to learn. Haley sat in her apartment that night, staring at her phone, feeling the weight of that choice. It would have been so easy to go to Laura, to help, to fix things like she always had. But easy wasn't the same as right. Laura needed to learn she was strong enough to handle hard things alone. And Haley needed to learn she wasn't responsible for fixing everything for people who'd chosen to leave her. It hurt. God, it hurt. But sometimes love means letting people face their own consequences, even when every instinct screams to rescue them. Chapter 6. The Breaking Point. Justin found the pregnancy test while digging through the bathroom trash, looking for a receipt he needed to return a shirt because he'd bought the wrong size and couldn't afford to waste $30. The pink lines stared up at him from beneath crumpled paper towels, impossible to miss, impossible to misunderstand. His hands froze on the trash can rim. His mind raced through possibilities, calculations, timelines. He came out of the bathroom holding the test like evidence of a crime. His face had gone red, his jaw tight with barely controlled rage. "Laura! Get out here right now!" Laura appeared from her room, where she'd been trying to nap away lingering cramps, saw what he was holding, and felt all the blood drain from her face so fast the room tilted slightly. Hector emerged from the kitchen, sensing trouble brewing. "Dad, what's—" "Your sister was pregnant." Justin's voice was shaking with rage. Or was. That's what's going on here. Laura's eyes filled with tears immediately, panic and shame and fear crashing together. "Dad, please." "Please what? Please don't be angry that my 17-year-old daughter got pregnant." "Stop it." Laura's voice cracked painfully. "Stop. Stop. My daughter is pregnant and you want me to stop being upset." "I'm not pregnant anymore." The words came out barely above a whisper. The room went completely silent. You could hear the upstairs neighbor's television, could hear someone in the hallway walking past, could hear every tiny sound that suddenly seemed too loud. Justin's face changed, confusion replacing anger. "What do you mean?" "I mean I took care of it. I handled it. It's done." "You—" He couldn't finish, just stared at her like she'd become a stranger. Hector sat down heavily on the couch. "Laura, when? How?" "Last week, I went to a clinic. I made the choice because I'm 17 years old, working minimum wage at a coffee shop, living in a 2-bedroom apartment with no money and no future. I can't bring a baby into this." Justin's voice dropped to something cold and dangerous. "Who helped you? A clinic wouldn't do that without parental consent. Someone had to take you." Laura's silence was its own answer. "It was her, wasn't it? You went crawling back to Haley after everything?" "No." Laura's voice was quiet but firm. "I called her. She said no. She told me to handle it myself. So I did." The room went silent again. "She said no?" Justin looked genuinely surprised, almost shocked. "Yes, she gave me a clinic name and told me I was old enough to make my own choices. So I went alone. I handled it alone, because that's what you wanted, right? For me to be independent? To not rely on her? I didn't mean—" "You didn't mean for me to actually have to deal with real consequences." Laura's voice was rising now, all the suppressed anger finally finding a target. "You divorced her? We chose you. We stood with you. And the first time I needed real help, you were drunk on the couch ranting about her, and she said no because I burned that bridge. So I figured it out. Alone." Justin looked at his daughter like he was seeing her for the first time. "I would have helped you." "Would you?" "Because I don't remember you helping with anything. Not the cars getting repossessed, not figuring out where we'd live, not any of it. You just kept saying we'd figure it out while Haley was the one who always actually figured everything out. That's not fair." "No. What's not fair is that I'm 17 and pregnant and scared, and the one person who would have helped me without judgment said no because I destroyed that relationship standing next to you at your birthday party while you destroyed her in front of everyone." She went to her room, slammed the door hard enough to rattle the frame. Hector looked at his father with something like disgust. "She's right. About all of it. Don't you start?" "No, I'm going to start. We chose you. We stood with you. And it turns out you don't actually know how to take care of us. You just knew how to criticize the woman who did everything." Hector stood up. "I'm moving out. I found a place. A guy from work has a room he's renting cheap. I'm taking it." "You're leaving me?" "Yeah, I'm leaving. Because staying here means watching you blame everyone else for choices you made. And I can't do that anymore." He went to his room to pack his things. Justin sat alone in the living room, surrounded by furniture that wasn't his, in an apartment that wasn't his, with children who were realizing he'd never been the hero of this story. He'd just been the villain who convinced everyone else they were wrong. Laura didn't come out of her room for 2 days straight. When she finally did, she had a plan. A better job lined up at a restaurant. A roommate situation with a girl from the coffee shop. A future that didn't include rescue or safety nets, or anyone coming to save her. "I'm leaving too," she told Justin flatly. "Next month, when I have enough money saved." "You're both just going to abandon me?" "We're not abandoning you. We're leaving. There's a difference. You abandoned the woman who raised us. We're just following your example." She went back to her room. And Justin sat alone in the dim apartment, finally understanding what Haley must have felt, standing in that kitchen doorway, while her family publicly reformed itself without her, while everyone she loved chose someone else. The difference was Haley had built something real to walk away to. Justin had absolutely nothing. Chapter 7. The Reckoning. The courtroom was nothing like television portrayed. Just a small hearing room with beige walls that had absorbed too many bitter arguments over the years, fluorescent lights humming slightly overhead, metal folding chairs that squeaked every time someone shifted their weight nervously. Justin sat at the plaintiff's table with a lawyer who looked fresh out of law school, young, nervous, shuffling papers with hands that trembled slightly. The suit he wore was cheap, shiny in all the wrong places, and his tie was knotted too tight like he was trying to strangle his own anxiety. Haley sat with Uncle Ray wearing a simple black dress that made her look professional and unshakable. Her face was calm, composed, serene even, the face of someone who knew exactly what was about to happen and had made complete peace with it weeks ago. Justin had lost more weight since the party. His suit, the same navy one from that night, hung loose on his diminished frame now, like he was shrinking inside it. Shadows lived permanently under his eyes, dark and deep, and when he looked at Haley across the small room, there was something desperate and pleading in his expression that hadn't been there before. The judge entered, and everyone stood automatically. She was older, grey-haired, with eyes that had seen every possible variation of human pettiness and learned to see through all of it with surgical precision. "Mr. Greaves, you're claiming that common law marriage principles entitle you to half the assets of Greaves Catering." The judge settled into her chair, already looking tired. Justin's lawyer stood, clearing his throat nervously. "Yes, Your Honor. My client lived with Ms. Matthews for 15 years. They raised children together, operated a business together as equal partners in every meaningful sense. The marriage may have legally ended, but the years of partnership and contribution should entitle him to equitable distribution of assets acquired during that time." Uncle Ray stood without any sense of hurry, his movements deliberate and measured. "Your Honor, with all respect to opposing counsel's argument, North Carolina abolished common law marriage recognition in 1895, more than a century ago. Mr. Greaves and Ms. Matthews were legally married, then legally divorced according to papers he signed willingly and publicly in front of 60 witnesses. The business in question, Greaves Catering, is not a marital asset subject to division. It's owned by the Della Matthews Family Trust, established in 1983, 42 years ago, decades before these two individuals ever met. He slid documents across to the judge with practiced ease. Mr. Greaves was never an owner of any kind. He was added as an authorized employee with full signatory authority in 2010 when he and Ms. Matthews married. He signed detailed employment documents at that time explicitly acknowledging his role as an employee with operational privileges, but zero ownership stake. These are the original documents bearing his signature. The judge reviewed the papers carefully, her reading glasses sliding down her nose slightly. "Mr. Greaves, did you sign these employment documents back in 2010? Justin's lawyer whispered something urgent to him. Justin leaned toward the microphone, his voice coming out weak and uncertain. "Yes, but I didn't understand what I was signing at the time. I thought after 15 years of marriage—" "That's not what I asked, Mr. Greaves. Did you read the documents that clearly and explicitly stated your role as an employee with operational authority, but absolutely no ownership stake whatsoever?" Silence stretched out uncomfortably. "Mr. Greaves." "No, Your Honor. I didn't read them carefully. I trusted—" "What you trusted is irrelevant to the legal question. Assumptions aren't legally binding, Mr. Greaves. Ms. Matthews, is there anything you'd like to add to the record?" Haley stood smoothly, her voice steady and clear. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit complete documentation of Mr. Greaves's compensation during his 15 years of employment with the family business." She handed over a thick folder. He was paid a salary of $85,000 annually, plus quarterly performance bonuses averaging $15,000, plus full family health insurance valued at approximately $18,000 annually, plus a company vehicle, plus an expense account for all business-related costs. Total compensation over 15 years comes to approximately $1.4 million. The judge's eyebrows rose noticeably as she reviewed the detailed documents. "This is for a business he now claims he personally built from nothing," Haley continued calmly. "A business that was actually founded by my grandmother, Della Matthews, in 1983, with money she saved from cleaning houses and catering church dinners in a time and place where banks systematically refused to loan money to black women. A business she grew while facing discrimination at every turn. A business she protected by putting it in an ironclad trust with very specific instructions that it remain in family hands only. Mr. Greaves never invested a single dollar of his own money into this business, never signed a single loan document, never personally risked anything beyond his labor, for which he was extremely well compensated over 15 years. The judge looked at Justin for a long, measured moment. "Mr. Greaves, this lawsuit is frivolous and borders on harassment of the respondent. You were paid quite generously for your work over 15 years. You signed documents explicitly acknowledging your employment status and lack of ownership. You cannot now claim ownership simply because the marriage ended badly and you're experiencing financial consequences. Case dismissed with prejudice. You're ordered to pay Ms. Matthews legal fees in the amount of—" She glanced at Uncle Ray's filing, $5,000. "You have 30 days to remit payment. We're done here." The gavel came down with a sound like a door slamming shut permanently. Outside the courthouse in the afternoon heat, Justin followed Haley desperately to her car through the parking lot. "Please, just talk to me for 1 minute. Please." She kept walking without breaking stride. "Haley, I have nothing left. Absolutely nothing." She stopped abruptly, turned around to face him. "Good." "What?" "Good. You should lose everything. Maybe then you'll finally understand what you did to me in front of 60 people. The kids barely speak to me anymore. That's not my problem. That's a consequence of your choices. You used them as weapons against me. Now they're realizing what that actually means. Laura was pregnant. She needed help, needed a mother." Haley's face stayed perfectly calm, but something flickered deep in her eyes. "I know, she called me. I told her no." Justin looked genuinely shocked. "You said no to her? When she was pregnant and scared?" "Yes, I said no, because I spent 15 years being the person who fixed absolutely everything for people who never once appreciated it. I'm not doing that anymore. She handled it herself. Good for her. She's stronger than you ever gave her credit for. You've changed completely. No, I just stopped pretending it was my job to save people from their own choices. You made yours. They made theirs. Now you all get to live with them. She got in her car, drove away without looking back. 2 months passed like water flowing over stones. Haley's new restaurant, Della's Kitchen, opened to a line around the entire block. Business boomed immediately. Food critics came, ate, wrote glowing reviews using words like revelation and authentic and the kind of food that makes you remember why you love food in the first place. Haley worked 80-hour weeks, personally learning every single role in her own restaurant, taking absolutely no credit she hadn't earned through sweat and exhaustion and relentless attention to every detail. At night, she went home to her small apartment, heated up leftovers, ate standing at the counter, fell into bed exhausted enough that she couldn't think or feel anything. One closing night, she found an envelope tucked carefully into the door handle when she was locking up. Inside, a letter written on notebook paper in Laura's careful handwriting. Haley, I had the baby. A girl. I named her Della, after your grandmother. I know I have no right to use that name. Dad's gone. Moved to Florida with some woman he met online, didn't even say goodbye, just sent a text. Hector and I are in a shelter. They give us 90 days to find work and housing. I'm not asking for help. I'm just telling you, you were right about everything. We chose wrong. I also wanted to say I understand now. I'm a mother, and I finally get it. How much you gave, how little we appreciated. Thank you for raising me. I'm sorry I made you regret it. Laura P.S. I'm enclosing a photo of Della. Haley's hands shook violently as she read. She pulled out the photo with fingers that didn't want to cooperate. A newborn baby with dark skin and bright eyes, wrapped in a thin hospital blanket, absolutely perfect and entirely innocent. She broke completely, stood in her empty restaurant with the lights still on, and cried the kind of tears that hurt coming up, that left her gasping for air, that felt like they were tearing something loose inside her chest that had been holding everything together. Because she loved them still, after everything, after the betrayal and the silence and the months of nothing. She still loved these kids who'd broken her heart so completely, and that love had nowhere safe to go. Her assistant manager found her 20 minutes later, still crying, still holding the photo. Haley, what happened? She wiped her face roughly with her sleeve. Nothing, just tired. You're not fine. I will be. I always am eventually. But she wasn't fine at all. That night she drove to the address on the letter, a women's shelter on the east side of the city. She parked outside in the darkness, engine running, watching through the lit windows. She saw Laura inside, rocking a baby, looking exhausted and too thin, and so much older than 17 should look. Saw Hector on a cot in the common area, staring at the ceiling like he was seeing his whole life play out up there and not liking any of it. Haley's hand reached for the door handle, pulled back, reached again, stayed there, shaking slightly. If she went inside right now, she'd be choosing them again, choosing to help, choosing to care, choosing to let them back in where they could hurt her all over again. She sat there for a full hour, watching, fighting with herself, trying to figure out what the right choice actually was. Finally, she drove away without going inside, went home, couldn't sleep at all, sat up all night staring at the photo of baby Della, this innocent child who'd done nothing wrong. At dawn, she called Uncle Ray with shaking hands. I need to set up a trust fund. For who? Laura's daughter, $50,000. For college when she turns 18. Della Matthews Greaves. Laura can't touch it. It has to be completely anonymous. She can never know it's from me. Haley, are you absolutely sure about this? No, but I'm doing it anyway. She set it up, signed all the papers, helped the innocent child without rescuing the adults who'd hurt her so badly. That would have to be enough. It would have to be. Because she couldn't do more without breaking again, and she'd already been broken once by these people. She wouldn't survive it a second time. Chapter 8. The accident. The phone call sliced through darkness at 3 in the morning. The kind that makes your heart stop before you're even fully awake, before your brain has processed anything except the primal knowledge that nothing good ever happens at this hour. Ms. Matthews, this is County General Hospital Emergency Department. You're listed as emergency contact for Laura Greaves. She's been in a serious accident. You need to come to the hospital immediately. Haley was in her car before she'd fully processed the words, driving through empty streets with her heart hammering so hard against her ribs she thought it might crack something. She ran 2 red lights, didn't care, could barely see through the fear. The hospital emergency entrance blazed with harsh fluorescent light that hurt her eyes. A nurse in blue scrubs led her through automatic doors that whooshed closed behind her, through corridors that smelled like antiseptic, desperately trying to cover up blood and fear, and all the ways human bodies fail. The surgical waiting area was small and far too bright. Hector was pacing like a caged animal, holding a baby that was screaming, not crying, screaming, the kind of desperate sound that tells you something is deeply, fundamentally wrong with the world. What happened? Haley's voice came out breathless from running. Hector turned, his eyes wild and red-rimmed with tears and terror. She was walking home from the late shift at the grocery store, had Della with her in the stroller. Some drunk driver jumped the curb, hit them both directly. His voice broke completely. Laura threw herself over the stroller, took the full impact with her own body. The baby's fine. The doctor checked her, just scared. But Laura... He couldn't finish. Just held the screaming baby who didn't understand why her mother wasn't there. Why this stranger was holding her. Why everything felt so wrong. Where is she now? Surgery. They said her pelvis is completely shattered. Internal bleeding, maybe spinal damage. They don't know yet how bad it is. They said... His breath hitched violently. They said it's really bad. Really, really bad. Haley's hands moved automatically, muscle memory taking over. She reached for the baby. Della came to her immediately, the screaming cutting off like someone had flipped a switch. The baby's tiny fists curled desperately into Haley's shirt, her whole small body molding against Haley's chest like she was trying to disappear into safety. "Where's your father?" "Florida. I called him 14 times. He texted back, 'Sorry to hear that. Keep me posted.' That's it. That's all he said." They sat in hard plastic chairs, waited while time moved wrong, too fast and too slow simultaneously, minutes stretching into hours. Della dozed fitfully against Haley's shoulder, whimpering in her sleep, making small distressed sounds that broke Haley's heart. 3 hours crawled by, then 4. Haley walked endless circles around the small waiting room with Della, humming songs her grandmother used to sing, feeling this tiny, warm weight against her chest and remembering every baby she'd held, every child she'd comforted, every life she'd poured love into over the years. Finally, a doctor emerged, still wearing surgical scrubs splattered with blood that made Haley's stomach turn. Her heart stopped completely. She made it through surgery, the doctor said, and Haley could breathe again. But the injuries are extremely severe. Shattered pelvis, ruptured spleen, which we had to remove, grade 3 liver laceration, significant blood loss requiring multiple transfusions. She'll recover, but it's going to be a very long road. Months of intensive physical therapy at minimum. She won't be able to work for quite some time. Won't be able to care for the baby alone for the foreseeable future. Hector stood up fast. "I'll help. I'll do whatever it takes." "You're 18 years old," the doctor said, his voice kind but absolutely firm. "Living in a shelter. Working odd jobs that don't provide any kind of stability or adequate income. I've already had to notify Child Protective Services as a precaution. They'll need to verify adequate care arrangements for the infant, or she'll be placed in temporary foster care for her own protection." "No." The word came out of Haley before she'd consciously decided to speak, before her brain caught up with her heart. "I'll take temporary guardianship. For the baby. Until Laura recovers enough to care for her." The doctor looked genuinely relieved. "Your family. I raised Laura from age 6. I'm listed as her emergency contact because I'm the closest thing to family she has in this world." "That'll work perfectly. We can start the paperwork immediately." Hector started crying again, relief and gratitude and shame all mixed together in a toxic combination. "Thank you. God, thank you so much. Don't thank me." Haley's voice was sharp enough to cut, stopping him cold. "I'm not doing this because I forgive you. I'm not doing this because we're family again. I'm doing this because she—" She looked down at Della, sleeping against her shoulder, so small and innocent. She didn't ask to be born into this mess. She didn't choose any of this. She deserves better than a shelter or foster care while her mother recovers from saving her life. What about Laura? Laura is an adult. She can recover at the shelter or figure something else out. I'm not rescuing her, but I won't let this baby suffer for choices other people made. Over the next days and weeks, Haley's carefully rebuilt life transformed again in ways she'd sworn she'd never allow. She hired a professional nanny to help during restaurant operating hours, brought Della to work in a portable bassinet when absolutely necessary, learned to function on 3 hours of sleep again, learned to plan everything around feeding schedules and diaper changes and all the tiny urgent needs of an infant who depended on her completely. She visited Laura in the hospital exactly twice a week, no more, no less. Brought updates on Della's progress, kept conversations clinical and brief, maintaining careful emotional distance. She's eating well, sleeping 4-hour stretches at night now, growing right on schedule. Laura would nod through tears that never seemed to stop flowing. "You're so good with her, so much better than I ever was. I've had more practice with babies. I don't deserve your help at all." "You don't, but she does. This isn't about you, Laura. This is about an innocent child. Will you ever be able to forgive me?" Haley would look at her, really look at this girl lying broken in a hospital bed, still just a child herself, despite the baby she'd created, despite the choices she'd made that seemed so much bigger than her years. "I don't know. Maybe someday, maybe never. But that's not why I'm here right now. I'm here because Della needs someone who knows how to take care of a baby properly, and you can't do it right now." 3 long months ground past slowly. Laura recovered enough to leave the hospital, but still needed physical therapy 3 times a week and couldn't work, could barely walk without assistance. Haley made a choice that felt completely impossible, but somehow necessary. She rented a small apartment for Laura and Hector, paid first and last month, basic furniture, gave Laura a job at the restaurant, washing dishes at first, the easiest physical work she could manage, starting at the absolute bottom with no special treatment. But every single night, without exception, Della came home with Haley. They worked out an arrangement that was messy and complicated and sometimes painful for everyone. Laura worked mornings at the restaurant when she was physically able, proving she could show up consistently, could be reliable, could handle responsibility even when her body hurt. Evenings, she'd spend exactly 2 hours with Della, feeding her, playing with her, learning slowly and carefully how to be a mother. Then Haley would take Della home, to an apartment that was slowly filling with baby things, a proper crib instead of the bassinet, stuffed animals, tiny clothes in every size, board books, all the physical evidence of a life being built around this child. It wasn't traditional, it wasn't clean or simple. Social workers came regularly to check on the arrangement, raised eyebrows, asked pointed questions about boundaries and long-term plans. But they couldn't deny that Della was absolutely thriving, happy, healthy, loved. Hector enrolled in community college, studying business seriously. Worked part-time at the restaurant, learning operations from the ground up. No special treatment, no family shortcuts. Just steady, honest work from someone trying desperately to prove he was more than his worst choices. Justin called once from Florida. "I heard you're raising Laura's baby. That's big of you." Haley hung up without responding. He didn't call again. 1 year passed like water flowing over stones, slow but relentless. The restaurant continued thriving. Laura became a prep cook, learning her great-great-grandmother's recipes with careful hands, earning each promotion through work that couldn't be disputed. Hector presented a detailed business plan for expanding the catering services, careful research, realistic projections, thoughtful strategy. Haley approved it, Not because he was Hector, but because it was genuinely good work that would benefit the business. And every single night, Haley came home to Della, rocked her to sleep, sang the songs her grandmother had taught her decades ago, whispered stories about strength and perseverance and building something from nothing. "Your name is Della," she'd say, holding this toddler who was growing so impossibly fast, "like your great-great-grandmother, who was the strongest woman I ever knew. She built something beautiful from nothing when everyone said she couldn't. She loved people who didn't always love her back properly, but she never stopped being herself. That's your legacy, not your grandfather's cruelty, not your mother's mistakes, your great-great-grandmother's strength." Some nights Laura would watch through the restaurant window as Haley left with Della, would see the way the baby reached automatically for Haley, called her Mama without any hesitation, and Laura would feel something break and heal simultaneously in her chest. This was what love looked like when it was real and honest. Not easy, not simple, but present, showing up even when it cost everything you had. Chapter 9. The viral moment. 18 months after the accident that changed everything, the world found Haley's story. The restaurant had been featured in a local food magazine, a nice spread with professional photos, and a story about Haley's grandmother starting the business in the 80s. Nothing dramatic, just good press that brought in some new customers. Then a food blogger with 300,000 followers found the article, posted it with detailed commentary that turned intensely personal. "The woman behind Della's kitchen has a story more powerful than her incredible food." Publicly divorced at her husband's birthday party. Her stepchildren stood silently beside him while he destroyed her. Now she's raising her stepdaughter's baby while teaching that same stepdaughter the recipes her great-great-grandmother created. This is what real resilience looks like. This is what grace under fire actually means. The post went viral in the truest sense. Shared 50,000 times in the first 24 hours. National news outlets picked it up. Television producers started calling. Newspaper reporters showed up at the restaurant unannounced. By evening, there were 3 news vans parked outside. Customers came not for the food, but to see the woman from the story, to shake her hand, to tell her how inspiring she was, how strong, how amazing. Laura saw the blog post during her break, standing in the restaurant bathroom, watching her phone screen light up with notification after notification as people shared it, commented on it, dissected her entire life like it was a reality show created specifically for their entertainment and judgment. The comments were absolutely vicious. Those kids should be deeply ashamed of themselves. She's a saint for even speaking to them after what they did to her. I would have left them to rot in that shelter. They don't deserve a single bit of her kindness. Imagine standing silently while your mother figure gets destroyed. What kind of monsters raise children like that? The father should be in jail for what he did to her publicly. Her co-workers had seen it too. The girl working the line beside her, someone Laura had thought was becoming a real friend, looked at her with completely new eyes. "That viral story, that's you, isn't it? You're the stepdaughter who stood there?" Laura could only nod, unable to speak around the lump in her throat. "Wow." The girl's voice was ice cold, final. "How do you even look at yourself in the mirror every morning knowing what you did to her?" Laura went to the bathroom, locked herself in a stall, sat on the closed toilet lid and cried as quietly as possible, her hands pressed over her mouth to muffle the sounds of her breakdown. When she finally came out, Haley was waiting by the sinks, her face unreadable. "Go home. Take the rest of the day off." "I can finish my shift. Go home. You're not in trouble with me, but you need to not be here right now while everyone processes this." Laura left through the back door, hood pulled up over her head, trying desperately to make herself invisible. Walked to the bus stop with her phone buzzing constantly, old classmates sending her the link, people from high school messaging her cruel things. The internet doing what it does best, finding someone to hate collectively. At home, Hector was staring at his laptop screen, reading the same blog post, scrolling through hundreds and hundreds of comments. "This is really bad. I know. Everyone knows our names now, our faces, exactly what we did." "Good." The voice came from the doorway. Justin. He'd driven up from Florida without any warning, let himself in with a key Hector had foolishly given him months ago during a moment of weakness. Maybe now people will see her for what she really is. Manipulative, using your child to make herself look like a hero when she's really just... Get out. Hector stood up so fast his chair tipped over and crashed to the floor. You don't live here. You don't get to walk in whenever you want anymore. I'm still your father. No. Laura was on her feet now too, something breaking loose inside her chest, all the suppressed rage finally finding its proper target. You're the man who abandoned us when we needed you most. You're the man who moved to Florida with a stranger while we were living in a shelter. You're the man who texted, "Sorry to hear that," when I was in surgery fighting for my life. But you're not our father, not in any way that actually matters. Justin's face twisted with anger. I gave you everything. You gave us nothing. Laura was shaking now, her voice rising. Haley gave us everything. The house we grew up in, the food we ate, the clothes we wore, the love we took for granted every single day. That was all her. You just showed up and took credit and complained that it wasn't enough. She poisoned you against me. You poisoned us. Laura's voice broke completely. You taught us that love was transactional, that loyalty could be bought, that the person who sacrificed the most was somehow worth the least. You taught us to be cruel and then acted shocked when we turned that cruelty back on you. I didn't teach you cruelty. You divorced her at your birthday party, Laura screamed with everything she had. In front of 60 people, and you made us choose sides. We stood with you because you convinced us she was the problem. If that's not cruelty, what is? And now you have the audacity to show up here and criticize the woman who's raising my daughter because I can't. Get out. Get out and don't ever come back. Hector moved to the door, held it open. She's right. We're done. We've been done. We just didn't want to admit it. Justin looked at his children and saw nothing but strangers. You'll regret this. No, Hector said quietly, his voice steady. We already regret everything else, every choice we made standing with you. This is the first thing we won't regret. Justin left. They never saw him again. That night, the restaurant was absolutely packed. People wanted to see Haley, to meet her in person, to tell her how inspiring her story was, how strong she was, how they'd never be able to survive what she survived. She smiled graciously, thanked them politely, answered questions with practiced grace. But inside, she felt nothing but exhaustion and a deep weariness that went all the way to her bones. When the last customer finally left, she sat alone in the empty restaurant with all the lights off except the exit signs, holding her phone. The blog post stared back at her from the screen, the comments praising her, the story painting her as some kind of hero or saint, but she didn't feel like a hero at all. She felt like a woman who'd made a choice because she couldn't live with the alternative. That wasn't heroism, that was just being human, that was just choosing the least painful option in a situation with no good choices. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Ms. Matthews? This is Officer Chen with the City Police Department. We have Justin Greaves in custody. He tried to break into your restaurant tonight about an hour ago. The alarm company called us. He's claiming he owns the business, that you stole it from him illegally. Haley closed her eyes slowly. I'll be right there. At the police station, Justin sat in a holding cell, disheveled and obviously drunk, smelling like cheap whiskey. The officer let Haley see him through the bars. You did this, Justin said when he saw her standing there. You turned my kids completely against me. You took everything I worked for. No, Justin, you did that all by yourself. You divorced me because you resented that I was better at running the business than you were. You used your children as weapons against me. You made every single wrong choice possible, and now you're blaming me for the natural consequences. I loved you. No. You loved what I could do for you. There's a difference, a big one. The kids will come back to me eventually. Eventually they'll see who you really are. Maybe, or maybe they'll see who they really are, and learn to be better than what you taught them. She turned to the officer. I'm not pressing charges. Just keep him here until he's sober enough to be safe. Then let him go. You're sure? Yes. He's not worth the paperwork or my time. She left, drove home through the quiet streets. Della was asleep in her crib, the nanny dozing in the chair beside her. Haley paid the nanny, saw her out, then stood over Della's crib for a long time, watching this tiny person breathe, so peaceful and innocent. I don't know if I'm doing this right, she whispered. I don't know if I'm helping or hurting, but I'm here, and I'll keep showing up. That's all I know how to do. Della slept on, peaceful, unaware of the mess the adults had made of everything around her. Haley went to her own room, lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow there would be more customers, more attention, more questions she didn't want to answer. But tonight, she let herself feel everything she'd been pushing down. The anger, the grief, the exhaustion, the stubborn, impossible love for these kids who'd broken her heart so completely. And somewhere in that darkness she found a truth. Walking away would have been easier. But easier wasn't always right. Chapter 10. The Weight of Staying. 2 years passed, but not the way stories usually promise. Della's kitchen had a second location now, just one. The third location Haley had planned fell through when the investor pulled out last minute. Laura worked the line, not head chef, not even sous chef, just a line cook who showed up on time. She'd applied to 3 culinary schools, got accepted to 2, couldn't afford either one even with financial aid because she was still paying down medical debt in tiny monthly installments that would take another 8 years to clear. Hector had enrolled in community college twice, dropped out twice. The business expansion plan he'd presented with such pride 18 months ago sat in a drawer somewhere gathering dust. Della turned 2, then 2.5. Started asking questions that had no good answers. Why doesn't Mama Laura live with us? Because she has her own home, baby. Why? Because that's just how things are sometimes. Some nights Haley was so tired she could barely stand. Some nights she put Della to bed and then sat on the couch staring at nothing for an hour. Some nights she wondered what her life would look like if she'd said no that night at the hospital. She never said these thoughts out loud, but they lived inside her like small stones she carried everywhere. On a Wednesday morning in March, Laura stood in Haley's office doorway, not quite entering, not quite leaving. I want to sign over full custody, not temporary guardianship, full legal adoption. Haley set down her pen. Laura, let me finish before I lose my nerve. Laura's hands shook. I watch you with her every day. I see how she reaches for you when she's scared. How she calls you mama, and it's not confused, it's just true. How you know she doesn't like her sandwich cut diagonally and that she needs her stuffed elephant to sleep. You're her mother. Giving birth doesn't make someone a mother. You taught me that. Laura's voice cracked. Every Sunday when you bring her over for our 2 hours together, I feel like I'm babysitting someone else's kid. And she feels it too. I can tell she feels the difference between being with you and being with me. That's just because she sees me more. No, it's because you're her mother, and I'm not. Not in any way that matters. Laura wiped her eyes. I'm 19 years old and I work at a restaurant and I come home to an empty apartment and I don't know who I am yet. How am I supposed to teach her who she is when I haven't figured that out myself? What about culinary school? I didn't get enough financial aid, so I'm staying here, working, paying off debt, living a life that isn't big or special. Laura's voice went quiet. Maybe not everyone gets a big life. Maybe some of us just get small lives that we have to figure out how to live anyway. Laura. I don't get a redemption story where everything works out. I get this. And the best thing I can do is admit that Della deserves better than me waiting around until I figure out how to be the mother she needs. Laura pulled papers from her bag, already signed. All you have to do is sign and file them. She's yours, legally, permanently, and I'm just the aunt who visits on Sundays, the one she'll barely remember. Are you sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway, because being sure isn't a requirement for doing the right thing. That evening, Hector found her in the office. He looked older than 20, older than he should. Laura told me what she did. Yeah. I've been thinking too. He sat down heavily. I'm not going back to school. I know you keep asking about registration dates, but I can't. And even if I could, what's the point? I'm already managing a restaurant. So what do you want? I don't know. That's the problem. I'm 20 and I don't know who I am or what I'm doing. I just feel like a kid pretending. He leaned back. I think about Dad sometimes. In Florida, with some woman, starting over like we never existed. Part of me hates him, but another part understands. Sometimes starting over looks easier than staying and fixing what you broke. You haven't broken anything. Haven't I? I stood next to him that night. I chose him over you. I can't undo that. And I see it sometimes in your eyes when you look at me. You remember. Hector, it's okay. I'd remember too. I do remember. Every day. He stood up. I just wanted you to know I'm not going anywhere. Not because I have some grand plan, but because I don't have anywhere else to go. This is it. This is my life now. He left before she could respond. That night, the nanny looked exhausted. She was asking for you all evening. Wouldn't settle down until I promised you'd be home soon. I'm sorry. She needs you home more. She's getting older. She notices when you're not there. Haley carried sleeping Della to bed, stood over the crib watching this child who called her mama, who had reorganized her entire life. She pulled out the adoption papers, sat at the kitchen table under harsh light, stared at the blank line where her signature would go. This wasn't like the movies where the music swells and the choice feels obvious. This felt heavy and messy and real. She thought about her grandmother, about Della Matthews, who'd survived everything, who'd taught Haley that strength wasn't about never being tired or scared. Strength was about showing up anyway, even when you weren't sure, even when the weight made you want to disappear. She signed the papers, not because she felt ready, not because she felt joyful, but because Della was asleep in the next room calling her mama in her dreams, and someone had to show up, someone had to stay. The next morning at the courthouse, Laura met her in the fluorescent-lit hallway while a bored clerk processed the forms. "Thank you," Laura said quietly. "Don't thank me. This is just what it is. Will you tell her about me, when she's older?" Haley looked at this girl who'd destroyed her and needed her, and would carry both those truths forever. "I'll tell her you made the hardest choice a mother can make. I'll tell her you loved her enough to let her go. And I'll make sure she knows where she came from." "That's more than I deserve." "Probably. But it's what she deserves." Della ran to her when she arrived at the nanny's, little arms outstretched. "Did you miss me?" "So much, much. I missed you too, baby." And she had, even though she was tired, even though her life looked nothing like she'd planned, even though some days the weight felt crushing. She'd missed her. That night, after Della finally slept, Haley sat on her couch in the dark. No wine, no music, just silence and the weight of choices that couldn't be undone. Tomorrow, she'd wake at 5, make breakfast, drop Della at daycare, open the restaurant, work a double shift, pick up Della, make dinner, bath, stories, collapse around 11, and then do it all again. That was her life now. Not the ending she'd imagined, not the revenge fantasy, not the triumphant comeback. Just this, just showing up, just staying, just loving a child who wasn't hers by blood, but was hers in every way that mattered. Her grandmother had been right. Strength wasn't about never breaking. It was about breaking and choosing to keep going anyway, even when keeping going looked nothing like winning, even when keeping going just looked like survival. She went to check on Della one more time. The little girl was sprawled across the crib, one arm flung over her stuffed elephant, mouth slightly open, completely at peace. Haley reached down, gently brushed hair from her forehead. "I don't know if I'm doing this right," she whispered. "I don't know if I'm enough, but I'm here, and I'm staying. That's all I've got to give you." Della slept on, dreaming whatever 2-year-olds dream, safe and loved and completely unaware of how much it cost to keep her that way. and Haley stood there in the dark, feeling the full weight of a choice that wasn't heroic or redemptive or anything like the stories promised. Just necessary, just real, just hers. The end.